Hello, everyone. Gonna get going in just a second. All right, we're gonna get going. Appreciate everybody joining today. Excited to talk through this. The goal today is to be pretty practical and shortened to the point. We're going to talk about the top three challenges that a business faces when they're trying to incorporate generative AI for the first time. And this is generally for businesses that are very new to AI. They don't have a defined strategy. They're just trying to figure out what makes sense for them to get going. And based on this, they're trying to implement for the first time. So this is what we're going to go through today. And, just to kind of reinforce the reality versus what you see today within the scene, and that is everyone is saying that AI can transform everything within your business. And this isn't an idle promise. A lot of businesses are seeing tremendous gains from AI, but the reality is that it's very difficult to make this really move the needle within your organization, and businesses feel that. So, the top three challenges we're going to talk through today are process, consistency, and reliability. And this shouldn't be a surprise really to anyone because I think that in order to improve your organization, you have to understand process and be able to incorporate any new technology into that business. And then consistency and reliability are commonly being spoken about within AI, and it makes sense that they're being spoken about. So these are the ones that we're going to talk through, starting with process. Okay. And the first challenge is that let's use AI, incorporate AI, go AI first. That's not a strategy, but it is where most businesses start. And this is how businesses get this wrong, is really in two ways. The first is that they don't identify a process. They just say, we've got to use AI. And it's a mandate and it's something that everybody tries unsuccessfully. And the second one is that they pick a process that's not actually a real pain point. And that is where a lot of people make this extremely difficult for them. You have to pick a process that is going to move the needle for your business and is felt within the business. So let's talk about the first one, which is actually picking the wrong process. Obviously, you should pick a process, but you have to understand that when you start incorporating new technologies within your business, there is a opportunity cost to making that live within your business. And as an example, if you take a weekly task, it's done once a week, usually takes 30 minutes, and you implement an AI process, so now it takes 15 minutes. It's a 50% time savings. So not small, especially when you look at it from that scale. But the change management associated with introducing a new tool, introducing a new process, is going to make this feel like more of a burden than anything else. And this is really going to burn your organization out if this is the approach you take. The right process to try and identify is one that's done multiple times, maybe daily, has several minutes each. And if you take that in combination, then all of a sudden you realize that you might be able to have a business impact that's worthwhile. So maybe I am approving a bunch of requests every day. Maybe I have to approve 50 requests every day. That only takes me, 30 seconds to a minute for each request. But all of a sudden, instead of having to understand the context of each request and approving each one individually, I get pre-approval notes from an AI agent, and all I have to do is go through and approve or disapprove each one. It takes each of those processes from 30 seconds to a minute to seconds. And if this is the case, then all of a sudden you have accelerated by quite a bit of a margin for your organization. And that would be a good way to approach a process. This bottom bullet down here, verification instead of creation, that's a really important concept. Um, if you think about processes, the right process in action would be I read an incoming message, I have to extract the details manually. Maybe this is like a PDF I get, an email I get, and I have to enter it into some system, right? Well, that is time consuming, it's tedious, it's error prone. Instead, I could get one of those requests, an AI agent could stage that for me, and all I have to do is approve. So I take the manual work out of it, and that would be something that's a good process to try and identify and start with within your organization. All right, let's just end with really making sure that if you are going to identify a process, a good way to do it is by asking, is it a real pain point? Is it a lived pain? And will it outweigh the change management needed? Let's talk about the second one, which is consistency. Okay. If you have a process within your business and you're going to automate it in some way, shape, or form, you have got to have consistency in the automation of that process. You have to have a predictable business outcome, especially if something is going to touch one of your customers. So let's think about this for a minute, right? Because what you will often see within an organization is they start to develop individual prompts, they start to develop individual GPTs, maybe, which is a custom chat with specific instruction that you can do. But what you'll find is that maybe you run that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and you get different answers every time. Maybe it's not dramatically different, but they are very, very different. And depending on your process, maybe this is okay. But when you start to try and automate a process, you need as consistent a result as possible. And so all of a sudden, having varying degrees of adherence to brand and tone or structure is not acceptable. And so the solution to this is actually having blueprints for what good looks like. Maybe I'm creating a form, maybe I'm creating a requirements document. Either way, you would specify the fields, the format, the structure, the content. And you could do this by starting with your best example and you build that into your prompting. And then every single time you run that process, what you're actually doing is you are actually iterating on the format that you have. So if I see that it's a little bit off, well, then I can go back and I can change my blueprint, update it to be correct, rerun it, and then in subsequent runs, when I do it maybe next week or tomorrow, then all of a sudden I've got it fixed already. We're actually going to have a webinar dedicated to blueprints next week on how you can create them within your organization. And this is really what it comes down to. You have a predictable output, you have a usable output, you have something that saves you even more time. The more you have to edit what you're getting, the less time you're saving from a quote unquote automated process. And then the last one is reliability. And this is pretty important because there are a couple of aspects to this that we're going to talk about. One is, do you know it's going to run every time? And the second is, can you trust the output? Can you verify the output? Um, let's talk about the first, which is just an uptime reality check, which is you expect software to work 99.9% of the time, and maybe even more, right? We expect software to work 100% of the time. We log into Microsoft Outlook, we log into Gmail, we expect it to be up, we expect it to be running, we expect that when I hit send, that email is sent 100% of the time. Now, all of a sudden, you have the reality of large language models, and there are a couple aspects here. One is just the uptime of the providers themselves. So maybe you're using OpenAI, maybe you're using Google's Gemini or Anthropic's Claude. Well, to be honest, those goes down all the time. They are very volatile because it's a new technology and because it's very compute intensive. So, because it's so compute intensive, the reality is that AI APIs fail a tremendous amount. Speaking as somebody who maintains these APIs for businesses, that's one of the things that GenServe does when we offer AI as a service. If we didn't have a tremendous amount of redundancy within our systems and retries, then none of our agents would honestly be acceptable to use. And you really need to think about how this could impact your business, which is even a 10% failure rate is something that is just going to entirely eat any benefit you may get from a solution. And so as you think about moving from just casual process automation with AI, and that might be a custom GPT. Maybe it is a set of processes or documents you're creating. Well, the less reliable they are, the more unlikely your businesses, your individuals within the business are to actually adopt them. And you find that you're always monitoring them. You have to kick it off again. You have to worry if it finished before it was done generating everything. It's just you have to really be aware of that. So as you move up the chain of kind of maturity as an AI adopter, then you have to understand what that might look like. And what this really means for you is that you have to build for failure. So I mentioned that redundancy is built into something we do, is built into the GenSurf platform. But practically, what this means is that you have to have automatic retries. You have to immediately know that failed. Let me try it again. You have to have fallback models. What we mean by that is maybe you're using GPT-5 for your standard generation, but sometimes that goes down. And if it does, can you fall back to Gemini 3 as a good failover? And if you can, then all of a sudden your system is a lot more resilient. And really, this just means building redundancy and by design. But if anybody has questions on that, I'd be happy to talk individually. Just reach out to me. And then this is something we'll spend just a few minutes on because it's such a key concept, which is trust. How do you trust the output you're getting from AI? And there's an old adage, which is to trust but verify. And I often say that with AI, you should not trust and you should also verify. And what this practically means is that all of the solutions that you have need to have a easy and foolproof way of verifying the content that you get. And the way this really rears its head is that AI often does not say I don't know. And you can see this in a few ways as you develop very sophisticated um, solutions, where what you end up seeing is that the solution itself, when you ask AI to fill in the blank and or extract information, and you give it an example of what that information should look like, well, if it doesn't know that if it can't find the information and you haven't explicitly told it otherwise, it'll just make something up. And that's extremely common. And you could call it a hallucination. But at the same time, you could also just consider it a shortcoming of your instructions to that particular model. So unless you explicitly tell it to, AI generally doesn't say, I don't know, and it'll give you just as confident an answer. And so, how do you deal with this when you're trying to start to automate business processes, when you're trying to start impacting your business? Well, Really, you need traceability. You need to know, where did this information come from, and how can I quickly verify that that information is correct? So, what does this look like in practice? Well, let's use a very common example within the industry today, which is, let's talk about contract extraction. And contract extraction is a great example because it's something we can all understand. What I mean by this is, I give AI a contract. Let's say I give OpenAI's GPT-5, ChatGPT, a contract, and I say, hey, I want to extract these 10 data fields from it. I want to know what the payment terms are. I want to know the start date, the end date, the amount, and maybe I want to know any exclusivity clauses, right? So pretty standard stuff for it. Well, it could do that. It could just give me back all of the information. But if I want to get a better sense and being able to trust it and be able to verify it, then what I will do instead is I would say, give me back all of the terms and tell me the page that they're on and tell me why you think that is the particular page. And maybe you get it back in a nicely formatted example where I've got the term itself, I've got the page that it's on, and a brief justification for why it thinks that's the page, right? And this is an example here where the term extracted is net 30 payment. I found it on page 47, section 4.2. And if you were building an application around this, you'd make it very quick to just click on it and pull that page up, and then you're done. You see it. But this is one of the things that's extremely important to build into the design of the process from the beginning, is to know, how am I going to verify the content that I see? And this is just one example, but there are many examples in practice. Okay. And, this is actually a really good way of thinking about how you can kind of progress as an organization, is when you're thinking about automating some processes, then the important thing is design it for failure, knowing that that could happen, and then be ready to build it for verification. How can you trust what you get out of it? And if you do those two things, then you're going to be in a very, very strong position to um, understand automation advantages. So the more you can be able to verify quickly, the more you can be able to have a system that is reliable, the more that you can just hand things off to it, and then all of a sudden you're able to get those 50% capacity increases. And that is what some businesses are seeing today. Some businesses really are seeing their employees being able to handle 2x the amount of capacity. That's not a pipe dream. That is happening. But you have to do it intentionally. And a big part of that is your process. All right. So, as a quick recap, and we're doing great on time. The first is process, right? Make sure you pick the right one. Start by picking a process, but make sure you pick the right one. And that means that you need to identify a pain point in your organization, typically high volume, typically manual. And that's a good um, place to start with AI, because you automate that, you can overcome the change management necessary to get it into your processes, and your employees will be happy. The second is consistency. We talked about building blueprints. We'll have an entire webinar next week on that, where I'll show you example prompts on how you can do that. And then all of a sudden, you can start realizing that within your organization. And then the third is reliability. As you start to automate more and more within your organization, within these flows, what does it look like to automate more? And that's where you can really start to understand the benefits of true automation, because the more is automated, the more it's reliable, the more you're going to get capacity increases. If you do get these three things right, then all of a sudden you will find yourself, not to be cliche, but you'll find your organization is able to be AI forward, is able to be AI first. But you have to set your organization up for success. And these are really practical ways of thinking about doing it. All right, I'll stick around for just a minute. And if there are any thoughts, then be happy to talk through what those are. This was just meant to be something short and also is meant to be helpful. And, hopefully people found it enlightening. I'm going to do a weekly webinar at this point. As I said, the next one is going to be on how to create blueprints within your business. And if you are curious about those, then we'll be very, very hands on. I'll give you the prompts that you're able to do that with. We'll walk through actually creating some blueprints within the webinar itself. So, haven't seen any questions come through here yet. So, with that, I think we're good to go and appreciate you joining today.